I'm Hannah, and I'm about to tell you the story of how I lost everything, my husband, my children, my home, and how I took it all back with a vengeance that still echoes through my family today. I'm a billionaire's daughter. My father left everything to my 3 little girls. Then my husband's cousin Andrea seduced him, manipulated my babies, and they threw me out of my own mansion. My 8-year-old twins and 6-year-old daughter called her Mommy. 2 months later, they came crawling back. But I wasn't the same woman anymore. This isn't just a story about betrayal. This is about a mother's revenge that shook an entire family to its core. So settle in, because you need to hear how this unfolds. 10 years ago, I met James at a charity gala my father hosted. I was the daughter of one of the biggest business tycoons in the country. And honestly, I had everything money could buy. But what I really wanted was simple. A family, a home filled with love and laughter, children running through the halls. James was charming, attentive, and he made me feel like I was just Hannah, not the billionaire's daughter. My father saw right through him, though. The night I told him I wanted to marry James, he looked at me with such sadness in his eyes and said, "Hannah, he's after your money. Please don't do this." But I was young and in love, and I thought my father was just being overprotective. I married James anyway. We had 3 beautiful daughters. First came the twins, Bella and Luna, with their bright eyes and infectious giggles. 2 years later, little Iris was born, the sweetest baby who completed our family. We lived in my family's mansion, this sprawling estate with gardens and fountains, and I thought we were building something beautiful. James worked in middle management at a firm downtown, and while he never became the success he always talked about becoming, I didn't care. I had my girls, and that was enough. Then 2 years ago, my father got sick. Cancer, aggressive and merciless. He had maybe 6 months, and he used that time to make sure his legacy was protected. The day we sat in the lawyer's office for the will reading, I expected my father to leave everything to me. Instead, the lawyer explained that my father had placed his entire fortune, the businesses, the properties, the investments, everything, into a trust fund for my 3 daughters. I was named as the trustee until each girl turned 25, but James got nothing directly, not a single dollar in his name. I remember the ride home that day. James's hands were white-knuckled on the steering wheel, and he kept muttering, "Your father never respected me. Never thought I was good enough." I tried to reassure him, told him we had access to everything we needed, that it didn't matter whose name was on the papers, but something shifted in him that day. He started drinking more, staying out late, and looking at me with this resentment I'd never seen before. The mansion, the money, the life we lived, none of it was really his, and he couldn't stand it. That's when Andrea showed up. She called one evening, James's distant cousin from another city, crying about how she'd lost her job and had nowhere to go. I didn't hesitate. Family helps family, right? I told her she could stay with us as long as she needed. She arrived with 2 suitcases and a smile that should have warned me. Andrea was beautiful in that calculated way. She knew exactly how to dress, how to move, how to make men look twice. Within days, she'd mapped out every corner of our lives. I watched her work her magic on James first. She'd wear these low-cut tops at breakfast, laugh a little too hard at his jokes, touch his arm when she talked to him. She'd stay up late when I went to bed, sharing drinks with him in the study, listening to all his complaints about how my father had humiliated him with that will. I wasn't blind, I saw what was happening, but I was so focused on my daughters that I convinced myself I was being paranoid. Then Andrea started working on my girls. She'd take them shopping and come back with bags full of expensive toys and clothes. She'd pile them in her car and take them to theme parks and movies, places I usually took them, but somehow when Andrea did it, everything was more exciting. I'd hear her whispering to them, "Your mommy is always so serious, isn't she? If I were your mommy, we'd have fun every day." Bella started saying, "Andrea is cooler than you, mommy." Luna would roll her eyes when I reminded her to do homework. And little Iris, my baby, started running to Andrea first when she came home from school. The poison was slow but effective. Within a few months, my daughters looked at me like I was the villain in their story. Andrea kept planting seeds, telling them I was the reason Daddy was always sad, that I was too strict, too boring, too old-fashioned. She promised them a life of freedom and fun if only mean Mommy wasn't around. They were 8 and 6 years old. They couldn't see they were being manipulated by a master. The day I caught James and Andrea together, I'd come home early from a charity meeting. I walked into my own bedroom and there they were, tangled in my sheets. The betrayal hit me like a physical blow. James didn't even look ashamed. He just stared at me and said, "I'm not sorry, Hannah. I'm in love with Andrea." Andrea sat up, pulling the sheet around herself, and smiled at me. Actually smiled. "He chose me, sweetheart." I couldn't breathe. I turned to leave and found all 3 of my daughters standing in the hallway. They'd heard everything, but instead of running to comfort me, Andrea called out, "Girls, come here!" And they ran past me into the bedroom. They climbed onto the bed with her, and Andrea held them while fake tears ran down her face. "Your mommy is trying to send me away," she sobbed. "She wants to break up our family." Bella looked at me with such anger in her 8-year-old eyes. "Why are you being so mean, Mommy?" Luna crossed her arms. "We want Andrea to stay." And Iris, my baby, buried her face in Andrea's shoulder and said, "Go away, mean Mommy." The next 2 months were the darkest of my life. James filed for divorce and his lawyers moved fast. I was so emotionally destroyed that I couldn't think straight. I signed papers I shouldn't have signed, agreed to things I should have fought. The divorce went through, and exactly 2 weeks later, James married Andrea in a ceremony at our local church. My daughters were flower girls, dressed in matching blue silk dresses, holding bouquets, and smiling in all the photos that Andrea made sure to post online. I wasn't invited to my own daughter's big day. Then came the night that still haunts me. Andrea called me and told me to come to the mansion for a family meeting. I thought maybe finally we could work out some arrangement for me to see my girls. Instead, I walked into my living room to find James and Andrea sitting on the couch like king and queen, with Bella, Luna, and Iris standing beside them holding Andrea's hands. Andrea spoke first, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "Hannah, the girls and I have talked, and we all agree this situation is confusing for them. They need stability." Bella nodded. "Andrea is our new mommy now." Luna added, "We don't need you anymore." And then Iris, my baby, who I'd rocked to sleep every night for 6 years, looked at me with these cold little eyes and said, "Go away, mean Mommy." Andrea stood up and walked toward me. "This is my house now, my family. You need to leave." I looked at James, waiting for him to say something, anything to defend me. He just stared at the floor. I was so broken, so completely shattered, that when they put papers in front of me giving James temporary custodial residence, I signed them. I actually signed away my right to live in my own home with my own children. I packed 1 suitcase with clothes and left everything else behind. My daughters watched from the window as I loaded my car, and not one of them cried. Not one of them ran out to hug me goodbye. I drove to a small apartment across town and collapsed on the floor. I didn't eat for 3 days. I couldn't function. I'd lost everything: my husband, my children, my home, my entire identity. I tried calling the girls every day, but Andrea had blocked my number. I drove to the mansion, but Andrea had hired security and they turned me away at the gate. Once I saw my babies playing in the front yard, and I called out to them. They looked at me, and then they turned away and ran back inside. That moment broke something fundamental in me. But while I was falling apart in my tiny apartment, something else was happening in that mansion. Andrea had won. She had James. She had the house. She had my children. And the moment she had everything, she stopped pretending to be nice. The gifts stopped. The trips stopped. The sweet words stopped. Within a week, my daughters learned who Andrea really was. Bella spilled juice at breakfast one morning, and Andrea slapped her across the face. "Clumsy little fool," Luna cried one night because she missed me, and Andrea locked her in her room for hours, screaming, "Your mother abandoned you. Stop crying about her." Iris had an accident and wet the bed, and Andrea called her disgusting, making her sleep on the floor. The home-cooked meals I used to make were replaced with cheap takeout. Andrea made my 8-year-olds and 6-year-old do all the housework, cooking, cleaning, laundry. "You need to earn your keep," she'd say. James was too drunk most days to notice what was happening to his own daughters. Andrea had what she wanted, access to the mansion, access to the wealth, and she was working on the real prize, breaking my father's trust fund and getting control of the millions in my daughters' names. But there was someone watching everything. Margaret, the sweet old nanny my father had hired years before he died, was still working in that house. Andrea couldn't fire her because my father had specifically included her in his will with employment protections. Margaret had raised me, and she loved my girls like her own grandchildren. She watched Andrea's cruelty with growing horror, and she started documenting everything: photos of the bruises, videos of Andrea screaming at the girls, recordings of phone calls where Andrea discussed her plans to steal the trust fund money. 2 months after I was thrown out, Bella overheard Andrea on the phone with one of her sketchy lawyer friends. Andrea was laughing, saying, "Once I get control of that trust, I'm leaving James and taking everything. Those brats are just meal tickets." Hannah was stupid enough to give up everything without a fight. Bella ran and told Luna and Iris what she'd heard, and in that moment, 3 little girls realized they'd destroyed their real mother for a monster who was using them. That night, at 11 o'clock, my doorbell rang. I wasn't sleeping. I hadn't been sleeping well for weeks. I opened the door and there they were, Bella, Luna, and Iris, all 3 sobbing, with bruises on Bella's arm and a cut on Iris's forehead. Luna threw herself at me, wrapping her arms around my waist. "Mommy, we're so sorry. Please help us. Please, please, we're so sorry." My heart shattered and healed in the same moment. I pulled all 3 of them inside, and through their tears, they told me everything. Every cruel word, every slap, every night going to bed hungry, every moment of terror living with Andrea. Bella cried, "She never loved us, Mommy. She only wants Grandpa's money." Luna sobbed, "We were so stupid. We're horrible daughters." And Iris, my baby, just kept saying, "I want my real mommy back." My phone rang. It was James. "Hannah, I made a terrible mistake. Please, we need to talk." I hung up on him. He was nothing to me anymore. But my daughters were everything, and they'd just learned the hardest lesson of their young lives. They expected me to be the same soft, broken woman who'd left 2 months ago. Instead, they found someone different. I knelt down to their level and said, "You threw me away like I was garbage. You chose her over me. You called her mommy while I cried myself to sleep every night. Why should I help you now?" The fear in their eyes was real. They'd never seen this version of me. Hard, cold, angry. But then I pulled them close and held them while they cried. "I'm your mother. I'll always protect you, but things will never be the same. You understand that, right?" They nodded against my shoulder, and for the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe again. The next morning, I called my father's lawyer, one of the best attorneys in the country. I called Margaret and got every piece of evidence she'd collected. I called social services with documentation of abuse. An emergency custody hearing was scheduled for the following week. But that wasn't enough for me. Andrea had taken everything from me, turned my children against me, and she needed to pay for more than just child abuse. I hired the best private investigator money could buy. Within days, he came back with information that made my blood run cold. Andrea had done this before. Twice. 2 previous marriages to wealthy men, the same pattern every time. Seduce, marry, manipulate, steal. One man had lost everything in a divorce she'd engineered. Another had died under mysterious circumstances, and Andrea had inherited his estate. She had outstanding warrants in another state for fraud. This wasn't just a bad woman. This was a career criminal who preyed on families. The custody hearing was scheduled in family court, but I made sure the criminal investigation was running parallel. The day we walked into that courtroom, I arrived in a power suit, every inch the billionaire's daughter I'd been raised to be. Andrea sat at the defendant's table, confident and smirking. She thought she'd won. She was legally the stepmother. She lived in the house. She had James on her side. The judge reviewed the evidence Margaret had collected, photos of bruises, videos of Andrea screaming at my daughters, recordings of her admitting she was trying to steal from the trust fund. I watched Andrea's face change from confident to confused to terrified. Then the bailiff opened the courtroom door and 2 police officers walked in. "Andrea Martinez, you're under arrest for fraud, forgery, identity theft, and child abuse." They read her rights while she screamed and struggled. "This is insane! James, do something!" But James just sat there, looking like he'd aged 20 years in 2 months. They dragged her out in handcuffs, and I felt nothing but cold satisfaction. My lawyers went after her with everything they had. Every document she'd forged was invalidated. Every penny she'd tried to transfer was recovered and returned to the trust. Her bank accounts were frozen. The criminal charges added up to a minimum of 15 years in prison. But we weren't done with James either. James had been complicit in Andrea's schemes. He'd signed documents, he'd allowed the abuse, he'd helped her try to break the trust fund. My lawyers destroyed him in court. He lost everything in the divorce settlement, not that he'd ever really had anything to begin with. I got a restraining order preventing him from seeing the girls unsupervised. He ended up in a cheap apartment across town, broke and alone, and my daughters didn't even ask to see him. The story went viral. Local news picked it up. Billionaire heiress takes down gold digger in dramatic courtroom showdown. Andrea's previous victims saw the coverage and came forward with their own stories. James's family disowned him. People would stop me on the street and say, "You're that mom who got her kids back. You're a hero." But I didn't feel like a hero. I felt like a mother who'd failed to protect her children when it mattered most, and who was now doing everything in her power to make it right. That was 6 months ago. Today my daughters and I are in therapy twice a week. We're rebuilding trust, slowly and carefully. They understand now that actions have consequences. They do chores, real chores, and they earn their privileges. No more spoiled princesses who think money means they can treat people badly. They're learning about loyalty, about honesty, about character. And me? I took over my father's business empire, something I'd never wanted before. But now I understand why he built it, not just for wealth, but for power and protection. I'm stronger now, smarter, and absolutely ruthless in business. But with my daughters, when they earn it, I'm still soft. I still read them bedtime stories. I still make their favorite pancakes on Sunday mornings. I still love them more than my own life. My father tried to warn me about James. He knew what I couldn't see, that some people will destroy everything good in pursuit of money that was never meant for them. Now I understand. And I'm teaching my daughters the same lesson. We visit my father's grave every week, and I tell him, "I finally understand, Dad. I finally get it." Andrea is in prison now, serving 12 years. Multiple charges stuck, and the previous victims won civil suits that left her with nothing. I made sure of it. James tried reaching out a few times, sending letters about how sorry he is, how he wants to be a father again. I burned them without reading them to the girls. He made his choice, and now he lives with it. My daughters learned the hardest lesson children can learn, that they had the best mother all along and they threw her away for someone who gave them candy but had poison underneath. Now when Bella hugs me, she whispers, "I'm sorry, Mommy. I love you." When Luna does something kind for others, she says, "Would this make you proud?" And when Iris crawls into my lap at night, she says, "You're my real mommy, my only mommy." People ask me if I've forgiven them. The truth is, I'm working on it. Some days are easier than others. But I'll never forget, and they'll never forget either. That's the price we all pay for the choices we made. I'm dating again, carefully and selectively, but I'm teaching my daughters the most important lesson. Never depend on a man for your worth, your home, or your happiness. Build your own empire. Protect your own legacy, and never, ever let someone make you doubt your own value. My father left everything to my daughters to protect them from men like James who would come for the money. He knew that predators can smell wealth, and he built walls around his granddaughters that even I couldn't fully appreciate until I'd lost everything. I didn't listen to him then, but I'm listening now. and I'm making sure my daughters never forget what happens when you let the wrong people into your life. They say revenge is a dish best served cold. I say it's best served with lawyers, evidence, and the strength to never back down. I am Hannah, daughter of a billionaire who knew the world better than I did, mother of 3 girls who learned their lesson the hard way, and a woman who rose from the ashes of her own destroyed life to reclaim everything that was hers. And to anyone out there who thinks they can manipulate, steal, or destroy a mother's love, watch out. Because when we finally open our eyes and see you for what you really are, there's no mercy left, only justice. I won. My daughters are home. Andrea is in prison. James is nothing. And I'm standing here stronger than I've ever been, ready to face whatever comes next. That's my story. That's my truth. And that's my victory.